Hello, I'm Kimberly Henry, and this is Living the Good Life. In this series, we'll feature conversations around ways to embrace the goodness of life and take a big, juicy bite out of it. Food for the soul and the funny bone. Learn to give more time to yourself, become a better friend, lead an amazing life, and how to tell the best joke at the party. Living the good life can mean different things to different people. Whatever it is for you, I hope you'll find some inspiration here to live your most joyful, authentic life. Now, on to today's conversation. Our guest today is Janine Bolon, shaman, scientist, author, podcast mentor, a Renaissance woman, if there ever was one. Janine has worked as an analytical biochemist, homeschooled 4 children, published, I think it's 12 books now, and was married to her college sweetheart for 30 years. In 2010, she was pulled into her life's purpose, and that purpose is to teach, write, and guide spiritual seekers of all paradigms into deeper relationships, and also to help folks work with the spiritual, emotional, and physical laws that work within financial abundance. She shares how to expand your intuitive gifts as well as help you uncover the blocks you have to improving your financial situation. I want to dive into that nugget just a little bit. She does that through podcasting, through her books, workshops, programs, online courses. And Janine is here to share with you how to gather money, live debt-free, and get your 2022 off to a fantastic start. Janine, welcome to Living the Good Life.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate it, Kimberly.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking some time to spend with us, especially knowing all of the content you're putting out. I don't know how you managed to carve out the time.
Well, that is the trick, isn't it? We can go into that in a little bit more detail when it comes to how you go about manifesting the life of your dreams. And that's said a lot. And a lot of people have all kinds of ways that they do it. Mm-hmm. But my systems are so simple that they're kind of boring. Most people go, really? That's it? And I'm like, yeah, I keep it pretty simple.
That's what I love about you, because you take kind of the ethereal, the spiritual, and all of the things. And even in business, people get really complicated, but then you boil it down. Are you an accountant, by the way?
No, I am not that detail oriented. I kind of bow to the east each time I meet an accountant because they're so good at their job.
I love accountants because I am not one. That is for sure. They get the utmost respect. But the reason I mention that is just because it feels like you've got it all tidied up so neatly. And I can't wait to learn from you today, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about where you are and what you're up to the first part of 2022.
Well, the beginning of the year is always so dynamic because of where I am in my life. I used to homeschool my 4 children, and currently I'm in a transition right now to this year because all 4 of my children are now out of high school. They are either in college or they are working in the workforce. So in previous years, I was much more mapped out by this time. Mm-hmm. But I find that for this particular year, I'm actually going to have to go on retreat. Actually, this Friday, I'm taking off for 3 days so I can go to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and hide out in a little Airbnb for 3 days. And I will be planning out my 2022. Normally, it's done by now. But for some reason, just because of the way life works, I had to stall it out a little bit. And so I will be sharing with you today some of the systems and processes that I use to make sure that my life and my year is everything that I want it to be.
This is such a juicy time for you, and I'm really excited for you with the transition that you're going through. So I can't wait to see how your year unfolds and how your planning retreat goes. Is that something that you do consistently, like once a year?
I go on retreat once a quarter, so 4 times a year. Yeah, it's one of those things that it started out of an intuitional pulse or prompting.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being something that I noticed was happening every time we had a seasonal change. So whether it was a solstice or an equinox, I was noticing I was moving to that, and I was having these retreats at that time. And it wasn't until I got involved with the Native American community that I actually got the connection. It took a bit for my analytical brain and my spiritual heart to connect. But when it did, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm actually moving in a biorhythmic way. I just didn't understand what the biology and the spirituality was trying to guide me toward.
Mm-hmm. How does that marry? I have so many questions for you. How does that marry those parts of your brain that are maybe the more analytical versus the spiritual, intuitive? How do you marry those two together so well?
The metaphor I like to use is that I am the driver of the car, and the car is my physical body, which I am very grateful for. And the engine, the motivation, and the drive and moving forward is all the analytical brain. But stepping on the gas pedal and steering is done by the heart.
Okay. So it's a tandem, it's a teamwork.
It has to operate in that way for me, so that I am able to move forward and steer my life according to my heart's desire, and then figuring out the how, the processes, the people, the resources. That's all for the brain to help me work out. But the initial inspiration, the prompting, the let's go here, the eagerness, the frisky nature, that all comes from the heart.
Frisky, I like that. Your story, we've spoken a few times, and I've read up on your story. And one of the things that you mentioned is being hit by lightning when you were brought into the Native American community, or the Thunder Clan is what you refer to. Can you just speak to that briefly before we dive into the nuts and bolts parts of our conversation today?
Oh, certainly. Being part of the Thunder Clan, one of the requirements is that you literally are struck by lightning. And so I was around 10 years of age, and I was on an island in Eleuthera of the Bahamas, of the Bahama Island chain. And my father was stationed there with the US Navy. And so I'm a military brat, moved around most of the world. And when we came back to the United States, it was almost 40 years, 38 years after that lightning strike, that Native Americans found me. And that was one of the very first questions that I was asked by the shaman of that particular tribe. He just snapped up and looked at me and went, "Have you been struck by lightning?" And I said, "Well, yes," when I was 10 years old, because I was sharing with him some of the visions I had been having. And he immediately grabbed me and said, "Oh my gosh, she's Heyoka." And I had no idea what that meant. I didn't understand that word. And it was through a lot of interactions with a lot of different people that I came to learn that it's a Dakota word, which is a form of spirituality that is very sacred to certain tribes. But the word Heyoka is from the Dakota people. And so I don't use that word to identify myself. It's a word that's been used by others to define me. But in my way, it's just a way of sharing that you have a spiritual purpose, like we all do, but those that are struck by lightning have a job that is bigger than themselves. There is a purpose that is not necessarily of their choosing. They are called into it almost, and I like to say it's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon where you got Daffy Ducks hanging on to the sides of a door and Bugs Bunny's trying to push him out the door and he's kicking and screaming. That's really what it means to be struck by lightning with the Thunder Clan. We are called into service in a way that if we had a moment to make the choice, we would run in the opposite direction.
Right. Most of us would, right?
and you would be right to. You would be right to.
How many people? I mean, that seems like such a unique thing to be struck by lightning. There can't be that many people who have done that and lived through it.
There are quite a few because of the tradition of certain Native American tribes. They actually look for that experience as a way to define their shamans, medicine people. I hesitate to use the word shaman because what we're talking about is a level of medicine. That's the term that is used. It's a level of medicine or healer that is part of what they call the crazy people. And depending upon the tribe, I've been honored to be able to work with over 16 different Native American tribes, both in Canada, North America, Central America, as well as South America. And it's been an honor to work with all of them. But each tribe has its own paradigm that somebody who's been struck by lightning works with. And so we're sometimes called two-faced or contrary, when in actuality, we're just morphing our medicine to the paradigm of the person who is receiving that healing. And so it will appear contrary to people who are trying to make you walk a straight line from point A to point B, when we know the fastest way for healing is maybe to work in a spiral. And so that perception can sometimes get in the way. So I liken it to the old Greek god of Janus, who tells the hero, you must choose. And they see Janus as that two-faced god. It's kind of that metaphor from the ancient Greeks that you can actually put into place here with the Native Americans when they're working with that ThunderClan individual.
It's amazing that you can pull from that and bring that into the work that you do on a more grounded is not the appropriate term, but a more analytical way of moving, as you said, moving forward. So let's talk a little bit about the process of the 4 steps that you're using your retreat to move forward. And I know that you recently talked about this on your own podcast, so I'm anxious to learn from you today.
Okay. One of the things that is important is that you make a choice in your life. Are you going to be a leaf on the wind, or are you going to create the life you want and not be a victim of destiny? Mm-hmm. And I very early on never believed in that paradigm of, oh, it must be my karma or it must be destiny, blah, blah, blah. I just didn't feel like karma was an appropriate way for me to view the world. And if you or your listeners are of that mindset where you see yourself as spiritual but not religious, or you see yourself as, I don't know what I don't know, but I sure as heck know what I need to do next, and it may fly in the face of conventional wisdom, then this is a process for you. Let's start it off with that. That this is a system that is not for people who want to stay in what's comfortable. This is not a system if you want to stay in a place where people will be very agreeable with you. Because when you start taking control of your own life and you start driving in the direction of your heart, using the skill sets and the engine and the resources of your analytical brain, because we all have it. And when you start doing that, guess what happens? You get happy and you start giggling and you're laughing at the synchronicities that are bringing this joy-filled life to you. And let me tell you something, nothing is more annoying if you were depressed, angry, or trying to maintain control of another person. Nothing is more annoying than to have that person be in total joy doing something that they shouldn't be allowed to do because you don't get the same results.
Okay. So
yeah.
We all know people who set goals and they're going to, take the bull by the horns. They're going to go out and build this incredible, whatever it is that set their heart on fire, but they just never get there. And that's not necessarily a depression. And so if it's not karma, what will this system help someone like that?
So as long as you don't call them goals, I think you'll be fine. One of the challenges I find with the word goals is when I look at football or soccer, you either get the ball in or you don't.
All right.
But if it's a target, you get points for getting close.
Ah, I love it.
Or if you're playing horseshoes, you get points if you get close. And that is a challenge of the American mindset that I've run into that you don't see in other countries. It's like you either get it or you don't. It's a very binary way of thinking. You're either on or you're off. And I like to say, hey, you're moving in the direction of your target. And originally you were like 45 degrees off course.
Right.
And now you're only 5 degrees off course. So that's progress. So you need to pat yourself on the back. And if you start looking at life in that kind of mindset, then you will achieve your goals or your targets every single time because you're not busting on yourself for not hitting the target bullseye.
Right.
You're giving yourself credit. You're patting yourself on the back every time you take a step that's closer and closer. And then when a target gets delayed or pushed back for whatever reason, you're still aiming toward it. So you don't see it as a life crippling event. You see it as, oh, so there's something else I'm going to be learning on this journey on my on my goal or on my journey to achieving that target that I've set for myself. You don't see it as failure. You see it as another thing you get to learn on your journey because you're excited by it. You're feeling eager to go after that target.
I want to go through all of my notes that I've made so far this year and change everywhere that I wrote goal to target. That is so profound.
It's just a little thing, but it is a societal metaphor that does not serve a creative individual.
Right. Okay. So what's step one? We're going to go on our retreat. My analytical side is just dying to know all the steps.
Okay, this is the process. These are the steps. Now, I tongue-in-cheek call this living my perfect life. Does that mean my life is perfect? Absolutely not. But when I create it in my head, it is perfect. Do you see where I'm going with this? So you start off with the ideal. I've been teased unmercifully all my life that you're such an idealist, Janine. You're such an idealist, but I'm also very pragmatic. So I like to play the game of I am going to create my perfect life, and I put that on a vision board. Now, before you roll your eyes, before you start groaning, because I know there's people out there, look, you can make this vision board a small 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that you have drawn images on. You do not have to make this extensive, but if you don't create a vision board, this is one of the challenges. You can tell me, especially, I love this about engineers and doctors, people who are used to three-dimensional thinking in their head. They tell me, I don't need to do a vision board. It's all in my head. Right. And I'm like, yes, you do. And they're like, why do you say that? I said, because your subconscious can't see it. And you're trying to activate your subconscious. So you need to have a three-dimensional object that you're walking by, or even make it I had one engineer that created it on his screensaver for his computer, so it would pop up. You need to have it in three-dimensional space-time so that you are training your subconscious with the images that you have on that vision board, so that your heart gets into it as it emotes the excitement it has for the experience, such as maybe you want to go parasailing. You know, I don't know if that's a goal, or a target, but, make it something fun. Like, I want to go parasailing. And then you'll start to see where that comes into your life experience. You'll start to see classes and all that other kind of stuff happening in your world. And that's coming from the fact that you're aligning not only your subconscious, but your analytical brain and also your heart, because you can't wait to have the harness strapped on, be behind the boat, skiing away. And the next thing you know, you're lifted off your feet and you're flying in the air behind a boat with a big parachute behind you. That just, for some people, that is the cat's meow. For others, it's terrifying. They never do anything like that. But it just depends on your worldview, right?
Right. Exactly.
So anyway, you've got to have that vision board. And so I already created my vision board because my children and I do that the week after the Christmas holidays. And so with that week afterwards, we create the vision board. So when I get ready to go on retreat, the next part of it is I'm going to break out my calendar. And this is where I'm a little bit old school. I take a calendar, the 2022 calendar, and I tear all the pages out of it and I lay out the calendar in the full year so I can see the full year.
Wow.
And then I put down everything that I know, like school schedules. When are the kids coming home from college? When, I put down the stuff that is set in stone, and school schedules and stuff like that. Then I put down when I know I'm going to go on retreats. Then I'm going to put down when I want to go on vacation because I'm self-employed. But even when I was in corporate America, you had to put in that request to go on vacation. So I put all that down, and I have 2 goals or targets that I always go for, which is one travel activity is going to be within the country, and one travel activity will be outside the country. Now, 2020 kind of put the kibosh on that, but it doesn't matter. To me, it's like, fine, I stay within country and I visit, but I always make sure I have 2 1-week-long trips in the year as well. Okay, so that is the calendar. And then you know what you want with your vision board. You've set up your calendar of the things that are known. And then comes, what do I want this year to look like? What do I want to experience? It's not what you want to achieve. It's not what you want to do. It's what do you want to experience? Now, some people tell me, I want to experience the feeling of holding the first book that I wrote. Okay, so sometimes that is the experience. And so that's a do thing. But I always really recommend from people that you figure out what is the experience you want, and then go worry about how you're going to go do it later. But first is the experience, right? Yeah. And then you put down on your calendar every Sunday. I choose Sunday. Some people say Friday night, some people say Saturday, but I spend from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. every Sunday. You will find me at my computer working through my vision board, working through the calendar the year-long calendar that I set up for myself. And I am working through that week's activities to make sure that I'm at least doing 1 or 2 items that week that are moving me forward on my vision board. And that answers the question you gave me at the top of the hour, which was, what do you do for those folks who don't hit their goals or don't hit their targets? And that is what you do. You're sitting in a meeting with yourself once a week where it's just me, myself, and I. And I'm looking at that vision board. I'm looking at the year plan that I have. And as we all know, as much as we have perfection in our brain for what's going to happen, life doesn't operate that way. And chaos ensues sometimes. And so adjustments need to be made, but you don't, just because adjustments need to be made doesn't mean you stop moving toward the progress you want to achieve for your personal targets. Okay.
Gotcha. So what you're doing, just to summarize, what you're doing in that 2-hour period is you're making those adjustments based on what else is going on in your world to make sure that you're focusing on the activities to move you forward.
Correct. And I have spreadsheets and I have checklists that I go through every Sunday where I am looking at the appropriateness for what are these activities that are popping up in my life. And it helps me say yes. And it also helps me say no to activities that are not in my highest and best good.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
So those are some of the things that you can do once a week is you sit down on that Sunday. And it used to take me 2 hours because I had a lot I wanted to accomplish or I had a lot I wanted to do. But after a period of doing this for years and years, I decided, okay, I really only need to go through these top 5 questions for myself. And so I go through those 5 questions and I usually am done within 30 to 45 minutes. But it just depends on what's happening in my life and how much I'm trying to get accomplished.
Sure. Okay. So first step is to spend some time every week. I'm trying to keep them organized in my brain. Spend some time every week kind of going over your schedule for that you have set during your retreat. So do you think, here's a question for you to kind of digress a little bit. Do you think it's important to spend that time on a retreat to set your year? Or if I don't feel like I can get away, how can we make that happen?
Well, for people who are caregivers or they have young children or what have you, I always hired a babysitter or something like that so I could get away for 4 hours. And
Okay.
I would grab a cup of coffee from McDonald's and because I needed something very inexpensive. So I'd grab a cup of coffee from McDonald's and I'd go sit out at a park bench near a lake or a stream or something. And in the wintertime, I would sit in my car huddled up with the heater going. And I would sit for 4 hours and I would plan out my year that way. But
Wow.
it's helpful to have your calendar laid out on a floor.
Mm.
So, I laid it out in the back of my minivan with the seats, rolled down. This process was the same. It was just sometimes I just didn't have the ability to get away the way I had planned. But
Mm-hmm.
there was one person who told me she just rented a hotel room for one night,
Mm-hmm.
and it was she left on Friday night, left the kids with the babysitter, told them she'd be back for breakfast, and then she spent the night in that hotel room and was able to sleep like a baby because she had managed to plan out her day and plan out her year, and she was able to kind of set up the systems that she wanted to put into place for her life.
Nice. So it really is important to take that time out, however you need to get it done. And resilience, I think, is the word that comes to mind here. Is, when those roadblocks get put up, if there's the kids or there's some other obstacle that you feel is keeping you from dedicating that time, you can always carve it out somehow. If you
I just want to, yes, exactly so, Kimberly. And I just want to let your community know that those excuses are always there.
Mhm.
You could so easily give up on this. This is the job of life. The whole purpose of life is to try to get you to live not in alignment with your heart and your head, right? That's its job. It's to bring a part of experiences and a contrast. And that's the job of the matrix, is to try to convince you away from that. Why? How else would you know what you want if you didn't have presented to you what you don't want?
Mm.
And so you have to have that contrast. So I don't bust on life for doing its job. However, until you take responsibility that you are the most important thing in the universe, you are the most important thing to work on in this universe. And then second is your relationships with your family and blah, blah, blah. Everybody has their own set of priorities, right?
Mhm.
But we are convinced at a very young age that it is selfish for us to think about ourselves first.
Mhm.
And there is nothing further from the truth.
Mhm.
The truth is, you are the most important thing in the universe because you came to this planet to create a wonderful life. And it took me too many years to realize that. And now that I understand the truth of what life is all about, I really focus that in. And I've had some people in seminars and that sort of thing kind of stand up and go, well, that's your truth, but that's not my truth. I said, you are welcome to live your life in whatever way you want. But when it comes down to the brass tacks, are you happy? And they will look at me very defiantly and say, yes, I am thrilled with my life. And I said, then there is no conflict between us. But when you start finding that your life is not happy, you've got to get to that point where you're putting yourself first.
Mhm. And that comes back to the vacations, as part of that calendar exercise, you put that pretty high up in priority, is the time for yourself.
And as any mystic or shaman or spiritual person will tell you, you have to get away. Solitude is required so that you can hear that small, still voice within. And that through that solitude, you get to define who you are, who you really are, as opposed to having other people define you.
Mhm.
And solitude is required for that. Now, there's one last piece to that puzzle, and that's where we talk about the perfect day. So we were talking about, how do you create your perfect life? That's through a vision board.
Mhm.
How do you create your perfect year? You sit down with your targets and your calendar, and you sit down every Sunday and you make sure you're staying in alignment with your vision
Mhm.
and your calendar. So
Mhm.
that's what you do for your perfect year. Your perfect week is you define when you're going to do certain things, such as when you're going to work. Now, I'm self-employed. I had to set office hours. It just depends on what you're doing, but you have to define, when are you going to make time to create? When are you going to make time to write? When are you going to make time for the things that are important to you, right?
Mhm.
And that's your perfect week. Now, your perfect day. This comes down to routines. Every successful person that you will run into has morning and evening routines. Why do they do this? They do this because those routines help them stay in alignment with their vision board and their calendar and the systems they have in place, so they make sure they stay on their targets. And even if you get off course because something crazy in your life happens, it doesn't matter, because those routines will bring you back into alignment and get you, instead of you running at 45 degrees off course, you're only 5 degrees off course.
So this is a question that comes up often with folks as I'm talking to people, and that is, if you don't feel like doing the routines, it's not chaos, it's not, life interruptions. It's just that doesn't feel good to have those routines. What do you say about that? The adjustments or working
I'd
around
say, I would, forgive me, Kimberly. I would say, were you the one that created the routine, or
Right.
did somebody else force you into that routine? See, my routine is I wake up at 4:05 every morning. And I know that I'm a morning person, but I also know that I do my best work before anybody else is up. It's that important to me to wake up. So I wake up at 4:05 in the morning, and I start writing at 4:30, and I have a whole list of items, but nobody told me I had to do these items. These are all self-imposed. These are things that bring me joy.
Right.
I meditate. I do my exercises. I do my stretches. I am doing things that I know are important to me, to my body, that help me feel good when I kickstart my day at 9 o'clock, when I sit down at my desk and I start work.
Yeah.
And so when creatives tell me that routines are boring, I say, are they your routines, or were they imposed upon you? Right. And then the other thing is the evening routine. At 8:30, my alarm goes off on my phone, and I immediately I head downstairs and I start brushing my teeth. I put on my pajamas. I unload the dishwasher. There is
So
a routine
exciting.
that I know, it sounds so exciting. But then as I get ready for bed, I read for a period of time, and I meditate, because that keeps me in alignment. I set the intention for how I'm going to sleep. And I also set the intention, if I have something that's bothering me, that I will get an answer for it when I wake up the next morning. And then I'm in bed by 9 o'clock listening to an audiobook or something that is pleasing to me. And then I wake up again at 4:05 and do it again. So some people say, but isn't that type of discipline so boring? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm doing everything I want that makes my life awesome. How can it be boring? If it's boring, it's telling you that you're listening to some other voice, not your true voice.
Right. Do you ever veer? Do you find yourself veering for an event or some other reason from your routine?
Of course, it happens all the time. It's called life and contrast.
Yes.
and did I tell you I was a mother of 4 children? So
Yes.
yes.
And it's okay, right?
See, this is the thing. We beat ourselves up, and we would never say the things that we say to ourselves in our own head. We would never say to a child or somebody who was doing their best. If you were looking at somebody and you knew that they were doing their best with that moment, you would never bust on them. Yet we do it to ourselves all the time. It's insane.
Yes, we are our own worst enemies when it comes to our speech. And I also heard someone say, and it might have been a quote I was reading of yours, I don't remember, that we talk to ourselves more than we talk to anyone else. So not only do we not talk as kindly to ourselves, but we speak more frequently unkindly to ourselves. So it's really makes sense to be mindful of what we're telling ourselves, for sure. Well, that sounds great. So vision board for planning your life, calendar session for planning your year, and then sitting down weekly to figure out what needs to be done in that week to move you forward. and daily routines. Did I get it right?
You totally got it right. Gold star, A++.
Woohoo. Yeah,
And so
I'm one of those people who likes the reward.
and you definitely get it. And the reward is that you will start living the life that you thought was impossible for you.
Yeah.
And so what I share with people is my perfect life didn't happen overnight. It took me 5 years to get where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's better than not even trying to go after that life. But I knew what I needed to do. And that was, I needed to work from home. I needed to make sure that I was the type of mom I wanted to be to my children. I wanted to homeschool them. I needed to make an income. I had all these things that had to happen. Mm-hmm. And I figured it out. It took time and I failed a lot. But every successful person you ever meet will talk about, yeah, I failed a lot. And some people say, oh, don't use the word fail, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I had a target set and I did not hit it. It was a fail. I own it, right? But at the same time, I learned how to shoot targets better. It takes time. It takes practice. And so I encourage everybody to just take time, allow yourself to practice, and you don't demand that a young child that's learning how to walk, if they stumble and fall, you don't demand that they immediately start running. You understand that it takes time to get to that level of balance. So give yourself the same permissions.
So speaking of all of that you have to do and the way that you've put it all together, you've got 12 books. Is that right?
Yes, I have 11 published and I'm working on number 12 right now.
Wow, that's incredible. You are a prolific podcaster. I counted 7 podcasts when I was looking.
There's a few.
And plus you do one-on-one coaching and also online courses. And you've got a couple of build your business boot camps and LinkedIn courses. I mean, I know the how, okay. You've already explained to us the how, but it feels like that's way more than one could fit into the typical work week. Is it possible to do all that in a 40-hour week? And of course, over time.
Right. And so when people look at everything I've accomplished, they're looking at what I've done over the last 7 years.
Okay.
And the thing that's interesting to me is when you start living life your way, you become a lot more productive and you stop holding yourself back in a lot of ways. And when you start really focusing in on what makes you personally happy and how do you go about doing that and how do you go about achieving that, then your creativity kind of cuts loose and you get so eager to go after the next thing. And when I figured out a system on how to write, when I realized, okay, you just need to get up at 4:05 every morning, do this, do that, make sure you meditate, make sure you exercise, make sure you eat right, which, by the way, my eating right may be very, very different from somebody else. But when I started listening to my own internal guidance, that's when I became super productive. Okay. But I was writing when I had small children. And there were some days where doing a load of dishes and being able to do a load of laundry was all I could handle because of a child being sick and me being excessively sleep deprived or something like that.
Right.
I did not operate at a good level. So a lot of times that whole day was what we call a lost day as far as productivity. However, I spent the whole day sitting on the couch reading nothing but board books to my children for hours and hours and hours. And to this day, they still remember those days where mom was on the couch with a laundry basket full of books that we'd gotten from the library. And we were just reading books because that was all I could do that day. It didn't matter what I had planned. That's all I could do. And I didn't bust on myself for that.
And you created some incredible memories for them. There's always a win.
There is always a win. And I sometimes think we forget about that because it doesn't look like the target that you're shooting for.
Right. It's close. It's a 5-pointer.
Exactly.
Love it. Well, I have loved our conversation today. And thank you for sharing your 4 steps for living your perfect life, and for all of us to hopefully follow suit and create what would be our own perfect life, which is what I love. Is it's going to be different for everyone, but there's some really good foundational steps to putting that into action and to creating that. And I appreciate you sharing that and giving us a little insight into your life story and how you've come to where you are. I'm excited to hear about your next book coming out. Is that the 4th book in the series that you have going on?
Yes, it is. It's the 4th book of the Divine series, and it's Creating with the Divine, How to Build Your Spiritual Business Over a Weekend.
Oh, lovely. I know so many people. Okay. How can folks get in touch with you?
I highly encourage them to go onto LinkedIn and look for Janine Bolon and ask to connect with me, because I have a team that will then make sure you are taken care of, and they will start messaging you and you will be able to reach me that way. The other way is, if you would like to be a beta reader, feel free to say that on your LinkedIn message to me. I'd like to be a beta reader for the Creating with the Divine. I'm always looking for people to read while I write. And what I do is I ship out a chapter at a time as I'm writing it and let you critique it. And at the end of that process, you are guaranteed a electronic version of the book. I give you the book for free because you helped me build it. And I would love your community to be a part of that.
Oh, fantastic. I love that process of writing. Very good. Well, Janine, thank you so much. I'm excited to hear how your 2022 goes when we get to the end of it, and where you decide to go on your travels. And I know that everyone will have learned a lot from your experiences and from your sharing today. So thank you so much.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share.
Be sure to check the show notes for links mentioned in this episode, and join us in the Living the Good Life Facebook community for previews of each episode, the opportunity to pose questions directly to our guests, bonus content, and a community of people committed to living their best life and sharing the journey. Thanks for listening. Let us know what value you received from this episode and what you'd like us to explore in the future in the comments. And please take a moment to drop us a like or some stars. I'm Kimberly Henry. Let's get out there and live the good life.